Hey Kartik, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rajiv. Thank you for having me here. I'm honored. It is my privilege to share this virtual stage with you.
It's absolutely mutual. We have been talking for a while through a very, very close friend of mine, Deepa. And then she was on the show in the earlier seasons, and she said, Kartik would love to come on this season. And when I got to know that you're going to talk about your book, I was all the more excited because the event is all about having book lovers come and talk about books. And when I have the author himself, what else can I ask for?
Well, I got to tell you, thank you for the invaluable service you provide. Right, Deepa's too kind. She's extraordinary. Full disclosure, we are family, so there is that, right? But as you've seen through the book, Rajiv, and thank you for reviewing the book and going through it. I am deeply, deeply, deeply passionate about leadership and specifically exemplary leadership. You and your organization, you are championing the right cause and you are providing a terrific service to not just one industry, right? Agnostic to industry. I think leadership is exceptionally transferable, regardless of what industry and what job function that you serve in. So thank you for the service you and your organization are providing. It's extraordinary.
Oh, thank you so much for those kind words. What was very intriguing for me is I have not met, and I'm going this on record, and no offense, all the technology guys, I have not met a technology person being passionate about leadership, which is my area of expertise. And the book is on that. You get to see technology people who understand technology. They probably look at human beings also as machines and they believe in AI and ML and all that. But there is somebody here on the show with me who is educated, raised, grown in that space, but is talking about leadership and has written a book on leadership. That's fantastic. How did
Yeah.
that happen? That's beautiful. I'd like to know that through the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of years ago, here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I actually gave a TED talk on the digital age, right? So look, we are in an unprecedented era, right? The fourth industrial revolution, and I think we just entered the fourth industrial revolution. So we don't have a playbook, we don't have a guidebook, we don't have a line of sight into what to expect. People actually sit up and take notice when I say this, Rajiv. The first email that you and I and everybody listening to this show ever sent was less than 25 years ago, right? The first text message, the first WhatsApp message you probably sent was probably less than 10 years ago. Think about the fact that our world did not know anything about cell phones or mobile phones or smartphones, 20 years ago, right? And look at us now. So it's been the seminal moment for us as a civilization.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, in the next 20, 30 years, technology is going to keep progressing, right, at an accelerated pace.
Hmm.
I think the hardest skills to master are the softest skills, right? And to me, leadership is the linchpin. It is the linchpin. You can program and automate and AI and machine learning pretty much everything, but there's something you will not be able to replicate with machines and robots. It's the human sense of empathy. It's the human sense of integrity, and the human sense of leadership. It is an innate, inherently human trait and a human quality, and I've said this in the book. In my opinion, leadership is one of the most powerful compounding forces in the known universe, right? So I think it's critical for technology leaders, business leaders, and people in the middle to double down on their soft skills and specifically on their leadership skills.
Lovely, so beautifully articulated before we get into the show. I think this is something that all the technology leaders across the world should listen to and probably start thinking out of the word technology and start thinking about people. End of the day, you
Yes,
are
sir.
leading people. Thank you so much for setting the ground, Karthik, and leading it from the front. Let me have the honor of introducing you. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whichever part of the world you are going to be when you are going to be listening to Karthik, the guest of the day. We have with us Kartik Sakthivel, who is Vice President and Chief Information Officer, LIMRA Global US. And this is a research consulting organization worldwide that works primarily in helping insurance and financial organizations expand and make their marketing and distribution more effective. That's a great space. I didn't know about the organization and went and read through interesting work. All right. He's also
Yes.
somebody who sees himself as a strategist, somebody who works on the space of vision, people, innovation, agile technology are the things that interest him. Besides, as he just said, he's also a book lover. The best is the author on the show Leaders in Libraries Season 3. I am so excited to talk about your book, and I have it here with me. That's the book you want to talk about. Superb. Thank you so much, Kartik. Absolutely excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Superb. Let's get started with the first question. I'm rubbing my hand to create some heat here. The first one goes to you, Kartik. Tell me, how did books happen and how did books play a role in your leadership growth? Let's quickly hear that.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. So you and I were exchanging ideas right before the show, right? I think look, books are critical. Reading is just absolutely so fundamental for leaders to expand their horizons, expand their perspective, and expand their mindset. So I was a voracious reader when I was a kid, right? I pretty much read everything that I could get my hands on.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I mentioned to you, I grew up in Mumbai and spent the first 18 years of my life there. My mom used to subscribe to all of these magazines, right? And I used to read them cover to cover, right? Everything from, and then I got hooked on Reader's Digest, which was pretty fascinating. Like all of us growing up in Mumbai, at least 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, right? We were voracious readers of like everything from the Hardy Boys to Enid Blyton, you would remember, right? And then I continued graduating to broader literature. At some point in my journey, I discovered my passion and my love for comic books. And people people say on the literature continuum, right? Comic books aren't necessarily will not be confused for the Iliad, right? But I can tell you, it's a fascinating read, right? That you've got all these interesting characters, and there's always a lesson of morality deeply rooted in there somewhere, right? So started reading comic books, primarily DC Comics, right? Got hooked on Superman, obviously the inspiration behind the title of this book, hooked on Superman and Batman, right? But then I continued to expand my horizons and read pretty much everything that I could. Here's my perspective, and hopefully you can use this as a backdrop for your show. Not all readers are leaders, but most leaders are readers, right?
Very true.
How else can you broaden your horizons, expand your mindset and your perspectives, and just build on the collective wisdom that other people, and you might not have to agree with their perspectives, right? It's actually better that you don't agree with their perspectives because then you form your own opinion to somebody else's. I think it's absolutely fundamentally critical for leaders to
Beautiful.
pick up a book, encourage their teams. Like I have the good fortune of leading up, really really smart people, right? Much smarter than I am, and I'm privileged to have that honor. Look, LIMRA Loma LL Global, we're the world's largest and oldest nonprofit trade association, right? So,
Hmm.
71 countries, 1,400 members. Most insurance companies across the world,
Hmm.
especially in life insurance, are members of the association, whether
Hmm.
it's research or education or training. Um, and across the world, I have yet to meet a single leader that I have a privilege of running into uh, that hasn't drawn inspiration from some book or some author somewhere, right?
That's it.
Whether you're reading Jack Welch or you're reading Simon Sinek, I
Yeah.
think it's very important for us to do that.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think that sets the context for the first question itself. As you rightly said, all of us have got inspired from different leaders in our own walks of life. What you say in this book, the first one is this: as a leader, you are the product of the traits of various leaders you seek to emulate. That's a very powerful statement you're making. All of us involuntarily emulate many leaders, starting from our own father, mother, whom we think are great leaders.
Yes.
What is your stand on this particular statement, and how should young leaders understand this?
Yeah, a great question. And I wish I could take credit for that profound statement, but it was our CEO, Dave Levinson, who's actually the forward author for the book. Reggie, we were in a leadership, an executive team meeting once, and then we were talking about leadership, right? And how we can invest in growing
Mm,
the next generation of leaders, which is
mhm,
something he's very passionate about. And he made that statement, right? And I had been thinking about the context, the backdrop for the book. I was still trying to form my opinions. I had been talking to multiple leaders across the world, and when he said that, as a leader, you are the product of the traits of other leaders you seek to emulate. it was striking, right? And I mentioned to you, I have the good fortune of having a 300-kilometer commute, right, back and forth to work, so it gives me a lot of thinking time. And then I question myself, right? So when I myself emulate others, right, others, I think it's been topical and timely and a point in time, right? The leaders who I personally found myself emulating has grown, has changed over the course of my career and my professional maturity, right? And I
Mhm,
think this is probably fairly common, Rajiv, for
mhm,
most professionals who are listening to this. And then I found myself asking the question, right? When I myself emulate the traits of these various leaders,
mhm,
whose traits am I emulating, right? What makes me gravitate towards certain traits
mhm,
versus others?
mhm,
How am I emulating these traits? Do I co-opt them and make them my own? Or am I just replicating them as is, right? And then do I apply specific traits for specific circumstances or situations, or is it carte blanche, right? And
mhm,
then ask me, it just made me question who am I as a leader myself?
mhm,
What is my leadership identity? Um, are any of these traits that I'm combining into this cocktail of leadership persona, right? Are they making me a more effective leader, or are they making me a combination of everybody else, right? Is this a good leadership style or a bad leadership style? And then you always think about the next generation of leaders, right? So as a leader, your fundamental responsibility is to grow other leaders, right? So then I started asking myself the question is, who's emulating my traits? What
mhm.
are they emulating? Are they emulating the right traits, right? And then, anyhow, long story short, right? I find throughout the course of my career, I have employed behaviors and characteristics of leaders that are probably contingent on a particular situation. Dave was absolutely spot on, right? He was 100% correct. We
Mhm.
are the sum product of the various leader behaviors that we seek to emulate. Um, the kind of leaders that we emulate changes over our careers. It depends on the circumstance and situation. But here's the thing, right? Here's the punchline. Emulating other leaders' behaviors
Mm.
gives us situational leadership shape and presence. But
Yeah.
then after my journey was concluded, right? Once I gave it some thought, but it is not the reflection of our core leadership traits and attributes. If it was, it wouldn't be this fluid, right?
True.
Your leadership core, who you are, is immutable, right? We
Mm.
wouldn't change and augment our traits and personas based on the leaders that we find ourselves surrounded with. And that, Rajiv, was essentially the genesis and the crux of the book, right? Is if these things are so fluid and malleable and
Yeah.
flexible and change all the time, it cannot be who we are at the core of our leadership persona.
Very true. Very true. If this did not happen and we don't emulate from leaders, what's the point of we living on this planet Earth? We could be a Martian. Yeah, we're surrounded with people around, and today, after this 40 minutes of conversation with you and having read the book, there are a few things that will probably start working in my mind. Next occasion, I go and talk to my team or talk to somebody else. Something will start working in my head basis what I learned from you and from the book. So it's a very organic process that happens. The beauty is some leaders discard it without putting a thought to it. Some leaders put a thought to it, bring it to the conscious, and then start working and making better of themselves. That's where the difference comes, isn't it?
Yep,
Yeah.
100% agree. 100% agree.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That's why reading is so important, right? You
Oh,
draw
yeah.
inspiration from everybody else. Yep.
Absolutely, absolutely. That takes me to the next one, and this is very interesting. All right, I'm always fascinated by certain frameworks and models because I'm a very process thinking person. Though I'm in the place of leadership, it gives me a space in which I operate. Doesn't make me go all over. From there,
That's right.
I think your concentrically layered composition of leaders that you talk about was very beautiful. I, in fact, read those pages 3 times. And I said, let me understand this very clearly. And you had that image, then you broke it into 3 elements of it, and then explained them beautifully. I want to understand how is this more powerful than the regular pyramid concept of leadership that people understand or have been reading over the years? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So as I was going through this thought process, Rajiv, as you saw in the book, right? I've tried to structure my thought process like you. I think very process oriented, right? So my thought process started off with Dave's statement, and as I was questioning, um, what shapes me as a leader, what traits and attributes shape me as a leader. I was like, how is leadership laid out, right? And that's where the concept of the first pyramid came about. It was my first iteration, right? Um, at the base, you have your childhood leadership experiences and your influences. On
Mm.
top of that, at the top, the middle stack of that pyramid is education. Leadership training and development programs
Sure.
that happen across organizations, and the pinnacle of that is all of your leadership experiences, right? And obviously the pinnacle, the top keeps growing, the middle keeps growing, right? But the base is relatively stable because those are your childhood experiences. They are lock solid and robust, right?
Mm.
Um, but then it was my first iteration. I was like, it can't be this rigid, right? So if you think about a
Very true.
pyramid, right, whether the Egyptian pyramids or a triangle, a pyramid is pretty rigid,
Mm.
right? It's lock solid. My fundamental belief, Rajiv, and that's the tenet of this book, what shapes a leader's innate persona is
Mm-hmm.
who the leader needed most when he or she was a child, right? This is your leadership core. When you are put into a position of influence, not authority, influence, such as
Mm-hmm.
a formal leadership role where you're responsible for other people, your core inner persona, envisioned by each child to compensate for something that he or she wished to have in a leader, but were
Mm.
powerless to influence as a child, is at the heart, at the core of every leadership decision that you
Very
make,
true.
right? And it could be subconscious. So this is your leadership persona, what I call the leadership superpowers, right? Metaphorically, this is your red cape, right? So the punchline on this is we as leaders are the products of who we needed most when we were children, right?
Correct.
So going back to the leadership pyramid, I was thinking that the pyramid seems too inflexible, too rigid, right? Too robust.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the next iteration came up with the concentric circles, right? If envision the concentric circles at the core, your leadership core, this is your leadership superpower, right? This is your traits and attributes that define who you are at the core. That's your red cape. Encircling that, encompassing that is all of the leadership education, leadership training and development that you've received, right? And the way I've illustrated that, if you will, is a series of endpoints, right? And all of
Mm.
these endpoints, if you see, are interconnected. And that's the
Right.
whole point of education, training, and development, right? It's for you
Mm.
as a leader to be able to connect the dots, right? So
Correct.
I mean that's the gist of it. The outermost ring of that, Rajiv, is this
Mm.
fluid, ever-changing spiral. And I had it as a
Right.
spiral because it continues to keep growing and spinning out, right?
Evolving.
And if you see, it's got these notches, and these are your seminal moments. These are your experiences. This is your experience layer, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
reason for that, and the way the book progresses, is I peel off, right, experiences. I talk a lot about leadership from the prism of leadership experiences. Then I look at leadership training and development and education. And when we think about training and development, Rajiv, most organizations, they don't train you, right? They
Mm.
don't train Rajiv. They train Rajiv the proxy, the Rajiv the persona, right? So
Correct.
everything, whether it's the disc profile or whether it's the Myers-Briggs score, whatever it is, right? Even when you have classroom training, it's never bespoke, right? It's never
Mm.
customized. It's always based on a persona who the organization thinks you are and need
Mm.
to be in a specific role, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the education layer, and we tease that apart. And in the middle, right in the middle, is that leadership core, right? The red cape. So and again, my philosophy here is that this inner core, Rajiv, this red
Mm-hmm.
cape, subconsciously influences how
Right.
you interpret and personalize education and training, and then how you as a leader experience experiences, right? So it's these all of these layers, these outer two layers, they're critical. Don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
They're absolutely critical, but they hide your inner core. We start losing touch with who we are at the
Mm.
core, and unlock our full potential. We as leaders need to dive through these outer two cores and outer two layers and surface the core. And hopefully, this book helps leaders to be able to do that.
So what you're saying is, as much as the three layers are exclusively independently important, when they come together, are you saying the leader should take an outside in approach or an inside out approach? what should be the directional movement for you?
So historically, what we do is go outside in, right? So outside in the sense of we have our core, we lose sight of who we are. We never
Hmm,
actually take the time to understand what makes us us, right? From a
hmm,
leadership traits and attributes perspective,
true.
we get influenced by all
Kartik, I think I lost you. You froze.
in the middle, right? So when I say outside in, I think it's important. And I think the answer is a little of both, tell you the truth, right? To be able to unpack your experiences, to understand how you have experienced and made decisions
Hmm,
through your career and been influenced by all the education you've received. It's important for you to understand who you are at your core, right? And then
right.
everything will just make sense. Everything just falls into place after that. You'll go, okay, this was my childhood formative experience. These are my traits and attributes. This is what makes me me, right? And this is why I interpret certain events. You and I might have the same set of leadership experiences, right? So
Hmm,
good, bad, or indifferent. We might have the same experience, but we will not handle it the same way. We will not
yeah,
interpret it the same way, right? And we don't have to if we're not robots, and that's what
correct.
makes us us. So I think because you've had a very different experience, we might have had the same education, the same background, right? But we are going to interpret and apply our interpretations very differently, and it's important to understand that because we know eyes wide open. If this is the kind of situation I'm dealt with, this is how I'm going to probably react. I think it's very important for us
Beautiful,
to do that.
beautiful. So as much as people look at the outer circles, you should not lose focus of the inner core, which is triggering the other circles any which ways for all of us. I think that's beautifully answered.
Correct.
And I like the name of the book, Find Your Red Cape, right? And you're wearing a red and a blue when you have a Superman thing in your seat in the back. It's almost like Kryptonic Superman, who's finding his superpowers. Right. Just I don't know if it's metaphoric, it just happened, or were you somebody who's always inspired by Superman as a hero?
Yeah, so I think the answer is all of the above, right? So look, at the end of the day, I mentioned, comic books are not known for their they're not to be confused with the Iliad, right? They're not going to be the next great American novel. But if you think about it, unpack, right, from a leadership point of view, it, integrity, what makes the character of Superman, right? You can always count on the character to do the right thing, right? What makes a leader a leader, in the context of Superman, here you have a fictional character, right? The most powerful being in the universe, right? Who could take down the entire universe, subjugate them in a nanosecond, right? But that's not what makes the character Superman. What makes the character Superman is the realization that you are the most powerful being in the universe, and the fact that you won't, right? The restraint and the ability to use your abilities to the betterment of everybody else, right? And I think what more leadership lesson is there than that, right? You might be the most powerful leader on the planet, but if you don't use it appropriately to benefit everybody else, that's useless, right? Like why are you a leader then?
Thanks for saying that. I'm so happy because you can see all smile on my face because I've been a huge fan of Superman. My kids are big into Spider-Man. They don't relate to Superman. I said, don't worry, he belongs to our generation. He's our
Yeah.
hero. Right?
Yep.
Super. That takes me to the next question. This was beautiful. Okay. And I always keep telling this that you authors have this knack of putting words together and creating magic out of a phrase. I can never do that. I don't know how you guys do that. I hope someday I'm able to do that if at all I write a book sometime. What you've written here is beautiful. That's a very powerful paradigm in my head. You say number of years of experience versus number of experiences in years. How should young leaders get this input from you and start working on their leadership journey? Give them some
Yeah.
tips.
Yeah, so I speak a lot about experience, right? And I have a whole, I think I have 3 chapters on leadership and crisis, and the anti-patterns that come with it. Look, experiences are critical, right?
Hmm,
So, when you graduate school, right, whether you're a master's degree graduate and you're going in, um, I think it takes a while to build up those experiences. Now, I'll give you a personal story, right? So, I graduated with my master's in computer science when I was I was like 19, right? So not even legal drinking age in the United States. So started working, got an internship, started working as a software developer, and it was a humbling experience, Reggie, because when I first
Mm,
started working, I actually thought I was a lot better than I was because I knew all this theory. I was a master's graduate, right? So and reality humbles you quicker than you know, right? And like looking back, I was terrible, right? I thought I was much better than I was, which kind of prohibited my learning, right? Because I'm like, I know all this stuff, and then when I actually had to execute and write code, I struggled, right? I was so blessed to have people around me that took the time patiently to teach me, right,
mm,
all of the things that they did, and it's a humbling journey. So the point I'm making is experiences are critical, and when I went on to my next job, and then my next one, and then my next one, I've been had the good fortune of serving many roles across multiple industries, right? And I think the collective aggregation of these experiences
mm.
just shape you as a professional, and they shape you as a leader because you're dealing with
Correct.
different circumstances, different processes, different technologies, and most importantly, different people, right?
So,
And I think those are critical. So this is why when you go from job A to job B or company A to company B, you get paid more, right? And I reference this in my book. The average, if you stay on your current job, right? If you get a merit increase every year, right? You get a salary increase. It's what 3 to 5%, maybe 10% when things are generous. If you switch from company A to company B with 5, 10 years of experience, you could be looking at 20, 30, 40% pay increases,
sure.
right? It's not anomalous. And why is that? Because they're not paying for you; they're paying for your experience, right?
Experience.
And the companies are hiring for what experiences you've aggregated through your career and you can bring over to them. So you can have an absolutely fulfilling career in the
Mm,
same organization, company loyalty, right? You can absolutely replicate that, right? If you're not motivated by the financial aspect of it all, right?
mm,
You're perfectly not comfortable, but you're perfectly happy
mm.
serving your own organization, and there's absolute immense value to that, right? uh, my message to leaders is stretch outside your comfort zone, right?
Mm,
Regardless of whether you change, companies, change careers, or stick with your organization, which
mm.
again is hugely invaluable from a continuity point of view. You have to stretch outside your comfort zone. So that's what I mean by number of years of experience versus the number of experiences in years. So you
Sure.
could, Rajiv, be in a company for 5 years and have less experiences than somebody who's been in that role for 2 years, but they have done a lot, right?
Yeah.
They've taken on direct assignments, they've taken on new challenges, they've taken on new jobs. A fulfilling way to stretch yourself is number one, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Mm,
Number
mm,
two, knock all of your objectives out of your park, like OKRs, objectives, goals, whatever deliverables your organization has, and then take on things that were not part of your objectives. We're
mm.
not part of it, right? You are, and people are like, well, if I'm not getting paid for it, why would I do it, right? You would do it because you're growing yourself and you're contributing
Sure.
into the organization, right?
True.
It's not about the current role that you're in. It's about 2 roles and 3 roles and 4 roles beyond that, right? So
Beautiful.
take on new challenges, new opportunities, special assignments. Ask for them, right? I guarantee you, if you go to your supervisor, you go to your manager, your leader, and say, "Hey, I am on track to complete all of the objectives that you have for me to further the interests of the organization. I think I'm ready for more. I'm looking to do something different, something stretchy, something that's going to help me grow, and truly partner with your leader in order to grow yourself, in order to grow your organization. That is
Mm.
absolutely critical. Stuff as much experiences as you can in your job.
I think you very rightly said this because I think loyalty is not in terms of, I've always believed that it's not in terms of number of years you spend with the organization. It's in terms of how much of 100% plus have you been giving to the
Exactly.
organization, doing multiple things. So I have never stayed
Exactly.
in an organization more than 5 years. I don't look at 10 years, 20 years. But in that 2 years, 3 years, have I expanded and done maximum that I could do in multiple spaces? I think what you said is very, very, very nice. Young leaders should take a note of this, what Kartik is saying. Preparing yourself for 2 roles ahead is a fantastic way to look at your career than looking at your current role and finishing those OKRs and KPIs, which are anyway expected out of you for your salary that you get on the end of the month. But looking at 2, 3 roles ahead is a better way to look at it. That's like finding your cape and figuring out where you want to move. That's very, very beautifully said, Karthik. Thank you so much for that.
Of
I'm going to
course,
come to
and then
the
Rajiv, very quickly, right? To your point, delivering, you know, getting a fulfilling job,
mm,
doing a fulfilling job, right? It's not about it's not about the amount of sales you make. It's not
mm,
about the number of story points or the code you sling, right?
mm.
How much code you write. It is about creating value, delivering value. And as a leader, it is all about the number of people you influence, right? So
True.
the more people you influence in a positive way, I think to me that's the epitome of a fulfilling role.
Absolutely. Epitome is the right word here. You know, I like the next one that you talk about, leaders in crisis. I think all of us go through crisis in different forms and formats. My plunge into entrepreneurship was kind of a crisis for a couple of months. Like, what am I doing? Should I do this? Not do this? It was crazy. It took 1.5 months for me to figure out what's the name of my organization, what should be the existential slide when I present it to the client, etc., etc., etc. All of us go through this. You have talked about a couple of things that leaders should do. You also talk about a couple of things that normally people lack. Tell us a little about what should leaders do that you think are the top from the list of 10 that you've given to them.
Yeah, thank you. So, so a couple of things, right? Look, I think leadership in crises,
Mm,
there is no playbook for it, right? So whenever you go through any training and development, they probably have a module or several module on crisis management, right? And
mm,
how leaders can navigate through a crisis. But unfortunately, that's where the theory of crisis management meets up against the reality of an actual crisis, right? So think about what's happening in the world today, right? No one actually anticipated things to get to this point, right? It's a lesson in leadership. It's a lesson in crisis management, right? Um, in my opinion, crises do not forge leaders; they reveal them, right?
mm,
So crises
mm.
do not forge leaders; they reveal them. So
Good.
I think there can be several missteps that people can make, leaders can make in crisis management, right? Number one, I think fear. So I just cite two, right?
Mm,
Several out of the several mistakes, I think I like outlined 7 to 10, right? But I think that the top ones to me would be an abject fear on how a crisis is going to impact me as a leader, right? I think it's important for leaders to realize it's not about you in that situation. It's about everybody else, right? It's about everybody else. And then the other thing and we've all experienced this, unfortunately, with leaders that we work with, right? The second thing is internalization, right? Is like, why is this happening to me, right? Again,
yeah.
it's not about you. It is not about you. It is about everybody else, right? So to me, crisis and crisis management requires steady, level-headed leadership, right?
Mm,
If a leader freaks out, right, the whole team freaks out.
yeah.
So my top two, Rajiv, would be, I think number one would be to avoid being paralyzed into inaction, right?
Beautiful.
Paralyzed into inaction by the fear of making a misstep, fear of uncertainty, fear of actually making a decision at the risk of making the crisis worse, right? To
Very true.
me, no action, inaction is worse than actually making a misstep that you can recover from.
True.
And number two is the inability to prioritize, right? So look, when you have crises coming at you, multiple things concurrently, it is easy to get lost. You can't tell the forest from the trees, right? So having that level-headed mindset and being able to, you're a process guy, right? So sequentially breaking it down into priority order,
Mm,
which you can then help inspire your team to focus on the things that are most important. And in the book, I talk about, the crisis on the Hudson, right? So, Captain Sullenberger and him landing the plane. They had between him and his co-pilot, they had just a few seconds to sequentially go through, make the right decisions while keeping all the 200 souls on board
very true.
calm through the process, right? So yeah, I'm not saying people need to have nerves of steel. I'm not saying crisis doesn't impact leaders. It does. How can you not, right? You're a human being. But in that moment to make sure that you're successfully navigating your organization and your teams and
Mm,
inspiring them that yes, regardless of how this works out, we're all going to get through this together. It's
Yeah.
just a lesson in leadership. Crisis management is critical.
Very, very true. I think your examples were very powerful because I've always been very hugely inspired by the defense folks, right? They have this ability to manage crisis. At least I can speak for India, and I'm sure it must apply to all the countries. Whenever a calamity or something happens which is not manageable by the local police, they immediately,
Yep.
let's call the army. They are the best. They land and they solve it as if this was so easy, and we would wonder why could the local police not do that? Which means there is something terribly missing here and something greatly available in the army as lessons for people to understand how do you manage crisis. They have a process, they take a step back, they look at it, address it, get things done. I
Yep.
think they
It's
beautifully do
the
that.
discipline execution. Yeah, 100%, 100% agree. And regardless of what army, right? I think it's that disciplined mindset of. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what they're trained for, right? I'm not saying the local law enforcement isn't trained for it, but it's a very different ball game when you talk about armed forces, right? Regardless of what country they belong to. I think it's just the surgical precision by which they can analyze a situation, unpack it, break it down into its microscopic parts, and then solve
yeah,
it by priority order. It's remarkable.
absolutely. Yeah. They just solve any crisis. They don't look at it as crisis at all. That's the beauty.
It's a day on the
Super.
job.
That's their job. Absolutely. Right. Uh, I like the next one, the seven C's. You talk about seven types of corporate leadership. And I was wondering, some of them I'm reading for the first time, Kartik. So thank you so much for exposing me to few new types of leadership. I didn't know that. I could relate to all of them in my own career, in my own uh, experience with multiple leaders whom I have emulated over the years. I've seen these seven playing in different forms and formats. What I want to understand from you is which are the two that you got hugely inspired in your own
Yeah.
leadership and you want to give that as an input for the young. I leave the
Well, thank
balance five for them to read from the book, but two from you on the show.
Sure. Absolutely. So a couple of things, right? And the way I framed these seven C's of the types of corporate leadership in the context of leadership or origin stories, right? So you
Mm,
said your kids gravitate towards Spider-Man. So Spider-Man's origin story was getting bit by a spider, and then
yeah,
he emerged as this superhero character when Uncle Ben got shot, right? So and when
correct.
he realized he could do something about it. Same thing with Batman when his parents were killed in an alleyway, right? Or what I was trying to get at, Rajiv, is what makes leaders leaders, right? What is your leadership origin story and how leaders become leaders? So the seven types of leadership origin stories are choice driven, right? So I make a conscious choice in my career to pivot from being a senior technical professional or an individual contributor into a formal leadership
Mm,
role where I'm responsible for people. Two
mm.
is it's care driven, right? So it's somewhere I'm aligned with my values and I'm focused on helping others achieve their goals. The third one is corporation driven, where the
Karthik,
corporation
you have to repeat it.
recognizes
You have to repeat the
Rajiv that
second.
you're doing a
Sorry,
great
sorry,
job.
sorry, Karthik, you have to repeat the second one. We lost you in between. Repeat the second one,
Oh,
please.
sorry. So first one is choice driven, right? Where the organization, has a choice.
Yeah.
You make a choice to become a leader. The second one is care driven, where you care so much that you take on more responsibilities
Mm,
and start leading other people. The third one is corporation driven, right? Where the organization will come to you and say, hey, you know what? You're doing a really good job here as a
mm,
senior technical professional. Can you lead and manage this block of people? The
mm,
fourth one is community driven, where people elevate you into that position of leadership because you're doing such a good job. You're just seen as this leadership person, right? The
mm,
fifth one is capability driven, where you have all of these skills and capabilities that you just execute. Sixth one is creativity driven, where you invent something that you then establish yourself as a leader, as a subject matter expert. And last but not least is childhood driven, where you've been a leader, you've seen yourself as a leader all your life, right? You've been the
mm,
captain of your team, your soccer team, your cricket team, what have you. So at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer. I think the worst mistake that corporations do, Rajiv, is taking people as a senior technical professional who've been very technical and saying
Mm.
you're a good technical person, you might be a good manager, right? And they hate it, right? They might
Yeah,
hate it, they might not do well at it, they might not be given the tools. So the top two, in my opinion, are choice driven and care driven, right? And the reason I say that is these are organic, right? If
mm.
you are making a conscious choice to serve as a leader, is because you care about it, right? And my
Yeah.
message to leaders or people aspiring to be leaders is, don't do it for the money, do
Mm.
not do it for the title, right? Do it for the right reason. It's because you actually care about
Absolutely.
serving all other people. There is no right or wrong answer. The origin story will be absolutely unique to you.
Very true. What you said makes so much of sense, Karthik, because when organizations make this fundamental mistake of promoting a Rajiv or a Karthik and say, you have been a coding person for so many years, you have been running sales for so many years, now it's time for you to become the first time manager and lead people. And Rajiv and Karthik jump at it because that's a fancy designation, there's money coming in, there's ego being satiated, etc. How many of us have actually paused and taken the choice driven route and figuring out, is this my core, which you spoke in the
Yes.
book?
Yep.
Will I do well in this? And if sales is best that I love to do, then you should do that as a subject matter expert and do that as an individual contributor for many years.
100%.
Now, I had a
100%.
great lesson many years back, Kartik. I was in Hawaii when I was with Dale Carnegie and Associates many years back, and we had gone for the centenary celebration there in Hawaii of Dale Carnegie, and great organization that has lived for 100 plus years without any advertisement of any form and format. We were having a lovely chat. All the Indian delegate we were there, and this guy walks up to us, an old man who must be in his 70, 72, and said, lovely to meet the next young set of guys who are taking Dale Carnegie to the next level. It's such a fabulous experience. We spoke to the person. He introduced his wife, and she told us that, oh, I'm tired of him doing this for so many years. I've been asking him to put his cap down. He's saying, no, on this centenary celebration, I'll put my cap down and take a rest. So this man was certified by somebody who got certified by Mr. Dale Carnegie himself. And
Wow.
he chose to be a trainer all along his life, said no to leadership roles, said no to regional roles. He said, I don't want to do anything. I'm passionate about standing on the floor and delivering courses. And he did that all through. So at 22, he started and he's 70. Look at the number of years, look at the number of lives he must have touched across.
100%,
I
right?
mean,
Amazing
he found the
story, isn't
score.
it?
That's his red cape, right?
Yep, 100%. That's what got him out of bed in the morning. That's what he was passionate about, right? And I completely agree with you, Reggie. So regardless of how people become a formal leader, right? Do it for the right reasons. It's not about money. It's not about job titles. It's about being in service to others and
Yeah.
helping them realize and unlock their own potential.
And
So,
loving what you're doing,
straight
most
story.
importantly,
Straight,
absolutely loving what you're doing, right?
yep, yep. Gets you out of bed in the morning. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't drag you off the bed. You just jump off the bed to go and do that.
Yep. Yep. You're inspired by trying to inspire other people. Yes.
Very good. So tell me, as I come to the last question, it's such a lovely conversation. I don't want to end it, but I am forced to end it. Finding your red cape, can you also interpret it as finding your core purpose of life, if I
100%.
can put it
Yep.
that way?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So look, you don't need a job title or to serve in a role where you're leading people, right? To be a leader. Everybody is a leader at some certain respects in their life, right? Your inner traits and attributes are your own, right? You can absolutely find, and obviously it's outside the scope of the book, but you can find yourself having made decisions driven by your traits and attributes. So hopefully, if your readers do have the opportunity to go through the assessment towards the end of the book, right, to help you unpack and unlock your own red cape, you can absolutely derive lessons from it and go, oh yeah, that's why I made the decisions that I made,
Yeah.
whether it's in a leadership context or not.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That brings me to the last question of this beautiful conversation with all the years of experience that you have, Karthik, and the book that you have written. And I'm going to hugely be an ambassador of this book on LinkedIn. I loved it. I just loved it.
Thank you very much.
Keep
Appreciate it.
writing more. I would love to call you the next season with the next book.
I
But
would love
before I
that. Thank you.
end the show, two bullseye advices for young leaders. What would they be?
Two bullseye advices. Okay, so the first one I would say to everybody, look, I'm really, really passionate about this, Rajiv, and I know you share my passion too for leadership. Leadership, like I mentioned earlier, is one of the most powerful compounding forces in the world, right?
Mm,
It's a huge, huge responsibility. Think about you can make or break someone's day. You can make or break someone's year,
mm,
make or break someone's career. People are too valuable, all of us are too valuable to suffer bad bosses and bad leaders. If
mm,
you are a formal leader, if you are a formal leader, it is your duty, it is your moral obligation
mm.
to serve, right? So please, please do it for the right reasons, recognizing the amount of innate influence that you have.
Beautiful.
And number two, the second I would say is if you consider yourself a good leader,
Mm,
you can be great. And if you consider yourself a great leader, you can always be better, right? And the way to do that is find who you are
mm.
and what subconsciously drives you and drives your leadership persona. So help yourself and then help others as well as you unlock your leadership core and unlock your full potential. So your leadership superpowers. So take this compounding force and continue to expand it out, right? And I can tell you, in closing, I think, look, leadership is a responsibility. It can also be a tall order task, right? It can be a tough. If you think about it in the context of work, it can be a tough job, right? So please do know the responsibility that you wield in being able to execute to the best of your potential
Beautiful.
in your
Thank you
role.
so much for those two bullseye. I'm going to add the third bullseye. Go pick up this book and read. That's the third
Oh,
bullseye
thank you.
advice to all of you. It's a beautiful book. It's a thick book, but very, very simple with a lot of questions that can get answered through Kartik, the author of the book. Kartik, that was a lovely conversation, very breezy. I thoroughly enjoyed. I hope you had a lovely time on the show.
I had a great time. Thank you for having me, Rajiv. And once again, thank you to the service that you're providing to people all across the world with the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to meeting you sometime when you come to this part of the world or when I fly to that part of the world. Till then,
I would love
take
that.
care.
Can't wait.
Bye bye.
Right. Bye, Rajiv.